we are joined with Mr. Joseph Ochieno from Uganda People's Congress. It's a pleasure having you, Mr. Ochieno. And of course, we know when we have you, we have the entire UPC here with us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I think it's my maiden presence here, and I've been asking, why has it taken me this long? And I'm just wondering, am I the first UPC guest here? And if I am, then I'm going to send you guys an invoice, because Uganda People's Congress is the foundation of this nation state. Uganda People's Congress fought for the restoration of multi-party politics. I led that external campaign, and in the absence of that, we will not be discussing this. But since we are also the political party of reconciliation, we healed the people through Idi Amin. We are committed to re-healing this country post Mr. Museveni, so you're forgiven.
Thank you for forgiving us. But taking us, UPC has been in this plight. If we can start from there, before we get to where, because you're saying the party will heal us after this regime. But it has been on a spotlight for quite some time, especially about party leadership and who should be and who he is. At some point, matters were in court, and then court ruled out, and then, you know, and probably this is the reason UP is not having a presidential candidate this time round. So, but what is the genesis of all this this confusion that is eating up a mother political party?
You're right. UPC is the grand old party. It's the oldest political party in this country. And since I was having a conversation with one of your colleagues before we came on air, and you've got a fantastic team here, I must say. I realized that we need to do a lot of historical context in terms of conversations. UPC was founded as Uganda National Congress in 1952. The name only changed after a bit of a mini split in 1959, and then we regrouped as Uganda People's Congress in 1960. The Democratic Party was founded in 1954. 2 years later, DP was founded effectively to counter Uganda People's Congress, a context with which we can discuss another time, considering the fact that this is a church television. But I can tell you, church polity contributed to the not the founding of Uganda People's Congress, but definitely the founding of the Democratic Party. Because Uganda People's Congress, while many people think that it is actually a Protestant political party, and it is an Anglican church. TV, I must be your PR person today. Uganda National Congress was founded predominantly by Ugandan nationalists, African nationalists, who believed that time was near for African peoples, Ugandan citizens, Ugandan peoples, to claim sovereignty for their land, motherland, Uganda, to push for fair prices, to push for access for Africans in jobs and opportunities, the Legislative Assembly, but above all, push for independence. It simply happens to be that the majority of the founding leaders, including founding our president, Ignatius Musazi, was a Protestant. And granted, the Protestants were massively privileged in a post-1892 Anglo-Catholic war. So the Protestants were predominantly much more privileged, much more accessed, and generally much more robust politically. And so the majority founded Uganda National Congress. But they did not found Uganda National Congress as a political party for Protestants. But because Mengo establishment was a Protestant establishment, and because the British establishment in Entebbe, who were ruling this country, were basically a Protestant establishment as the British monarchy. Once Uganda National Congress is founded and the majority of the leadership were Protestants, I think the Uganda Catholic establishment, or the Catholic establishment per se, felt that, well, you know, all these others now this. So DP was founded sort of as a Catholic political party to counter, amongst others. But there's a particular section of Ugandan community who believed that the Democratic Party was founded by a critical number of Catholics who were pushing for some other interest. But whatever the case, that's the background. Fast forward to where we are today.
Yes.
It is not true that we are not, quote, in the race because of internal issues in the party.
Okay.
But there are major internal issues in the party. The internal issues in the party are a direct result of the Ugandan state and the NRM that fears competition of ideas, and they'll do anything and everything to lure people through money, other issues and other issues. The reason is primarily because of the incompetence of the judicial system. We had an uncompleted election process in which, indeed, I was elected president in 2020. I went to court to seek a judicial review. The matter went to court on the 17th of March 2021. Judicial review, for lawyers watching, is something that should not take more than 6 months. In the UPC administration, that would happen. That has now taken 4.5 years plus 4 other judges. So because coming to the election process, we had Jim McKenna, who had been thrown out by court in 2020 September as not leader of the party, but continued to hold on with the support of quite clearly the state, and now later challenged by one Dennis Enap when he attempted to reclaim his mandate. I was on the other side waiting. So Enap went to court to say that, Jimmy, if you've been in power since 2015, you've spent 10 years, which is equivalent of 2 constitutional mandate seasons, and the party constitution says not more than 2 terms. So Enap scored on that. Coming to the election times, it was very clear the case that Jimmy was calling for a delegates conference, and because I had a pending matter in court, my lawyers sought an injunction because Jimmy didn't have the right to call a delegates conference. That's sort of how it ended. So in a way, not having a candidate is a result of a judicial process. Had this matter been resolved in 2021, March definitively, I would have been the party president. Jimmy would have had a permanent injunction against him. Enap wouldn't have a reason, and there would be no matter. That's the matter which is pending. That's sort of the context of that. But that said, I think the citizens of this country was part of a television debate yesterday for 8 candidates. Only 5 turned up. I think 3 ducked out, including the incumbent, which is very sad. The people of this country are sad because there is no alternative programs from Uganda People's Congress, and there's no representation from UPC members, and the citizens of this country, after 40 years, madly needed to have an alternative voice. And the alternative voice which is lacking that table is UPC voice, considering that UPC was the party that led this country to independence. NRA fought them, and is the only political party that has twice gone into government after elections, and the only political party that has never been diselected in a vote, but is also the only political party that in only 12 years of 2 different administrations has contributed to about 65 to 70% of the current national infrastructure, whether it's health, education, transportation, and rail and air. That is the power of Uganda People's Congress. But for the moment, we say it's a transitional period. We are the future.
Well, looking at all these details, now the big question is, good, you said it, you followed the debate, and probably different candidates expressed their visions for this country for the next 5 years if given an opportunity. But what do you find realistic and unrealistic out of these manifestos? Because at least everyone has presented their manifesto to the citizens to follow through. We have money in the pocket, we have New Uganda, we have protecting the gains and others. So what do you find realistic and unrealistic out of all this? Now that UPC's manifesto is not a part of this that we're discussing, and probably UPC would have given an alternative.
Not probably. The only alternative is Uganda People's Congress, because ours is evidence-based. Ours based on experience. Ours would have been costed. Ours would have been realistic, and ours would be a challenged alternative. I found my Mwiri Obi and Dala Mafabi being rather progressively detailed in his submissions, and predominantly realistic, I think, on the basis of content of his commitments as far as the debating was concerned. I would possibly give him up to 80% in terms of content. How the matter was delivered is another issue. I'm a communications person amongst many other things, so those are neither here nor there. But in terms of content, is that if you're confining me to the debate, I found none of the candidates gave an impressive, a satisfactory response from my perspective on the question of how they would realistically, your point, deal with youth unemployment in this country or general unemployment. And so that was to me rather disappointing. My other brother, Gregory Mugisha Muntu, was fairly composed, and in terms of his usual, what we would call rhetorics, I found it slightly much more coherent yesterday than I've found in the past. I mean, some of these guys have always been turning me off, but I found it reasonably coherent. I must say that Mabirizi is the first time to be fair, you guys, I was listening, because I rarely spent time listening to these guys. Away from the content, he was initially gave him as the best, most composed, relaxed. Strange enough, when you're in the studio, he speaks slowly, but when you see in terms of statesmanly should be, I gave him an early one on that. Then our friend who spoke about Chiingi. Yes. In terms of energy, I give it to him. I just thought he was much more focused on Chiingi, the person, and the values, rather than what they would do. But considering the fact that he was also talking about the injustices meted allegedly on Chiingi, and that he came in late, and he's making a late arrival at this as such, to his credit, when you go into the details of what this country really needs, I'm not sure. Now, of course, the favorite in terms of those people who were there was Robert Chagulanyi. He was the person yesterday who needed to keep steady, because in terms of polling, he has the biggest numbers in terms of people who turned up. I expected him to have run with the question of youth unemployment, and that, although the figures person is Mafabi, if a gateway is driving the youth thing, his advisors ought to have helped him to be sanctioned on this. But his presentation was energetic to the extent that he was speaking to his audience, and I'm sure his audience liked it. I'm not quite sure how other people who are not his audience, part of what we call the swing voters, like Ochieno, who does not have a presidential candidate, I'm not sure whether it would necessarily have been convincing enough to me. But the most important are the other three people who are not there. The other two, I'll put them aside. But candidate Museveni, I think NTV handled it well, because they fear UCC, perhaps. I don't know whether candidate Museveni was not there because he thought, I don't know what formal reason was given. In any case, there was a huge viewership of this, and this was quite impressive, actually. And I'm sure people were waiting to see. So if people were waiting to see yesterday, people were waiting to see what candidate Museveni has got to tell the people of Tororo, any gains from by the people of Tororo, which is basically my former voice, versus anything new from young Chagulanyi and other candidates. But to not turn up, I think they would argue that they have nothing to lose, since they're gainers for whatever they gains. I would really have liked him to be there. But interestingly, I was seated next to a parliamentary candidate of another political party who said that their absence, and quite rightly, meant that they possibly lost an opportunity to gain one or two. Because if Candidate Museveni, if you attended this thing yesterday, one or two people may have come to you. But I think his advisors were saying that maybe if you came down there and then you got some difficult question, you might get a turn-off. I'm not quite sure from an advisory perspective. I don't know. As an objective Ugandan voter, I would think that you are disrespecting the voters. You are taking them for granted, and I would have not much reason to push for you, but that's not from a prejudiced UPC, but really from a scholarly, media, political, analytical perspective. Finally, linked to that, I will not mention a candidate. There was a particular candidate that I thought was also slightly too presumptuous on those sets, including an apparent establishment leading towards the polls. Voters in a more voter conscious spaces where civic education is at the top. Voters really don't like people who are complacent. Voters don't like to be taken for granted. Voters like to feel that you are doing your level best to kneel down and beg them for your vote. Not that you're desperate, but that you're totally committed to getting their votes because you want to serve them as a nation. But when you present yourself as if it's over, Tony Blair, under whom I served as a constituency chairperson for his party, said at the key critical election time that it's not over until it's over.
Well, at that point, we are taking a short commercial break. When we return, we want to now get into the inner depth of the realities of what we see on paper that candidates present to us while they're campaigning, because there are things we never hear again until the next elections. So that's where we are going to base our discussion when we come back shortly. Stick with us.
Issues at hand. Issues at hand.
Welcome back from the break. We're looking at realities and versus what is on paper, because at least every candidate, if we look at the presidential candidates, everyone had an opportunity to launch their manifesto. This is not the first time this happens. People have launched these manifestos. We've seen the manifestos, and of course those that have gone through, even the parliamentary candidates have had manifestos presented, but when we say we are now checking, I don't know if we ever get to that point of now cross-examining what was on paper and what is in the reality. Mr. Ochieno, looking at this is a very big gap between promise and fulfillment. On the way to the fulfillment, a lot of things happen. That sometimes we talk about what we fulfilled that we never promised, and sometimes no one ever gets back to check. For example, this particular electoral season, if we looked at the manifestos that probably some people presented in 2021 elections and today, unfortunately, a few people would pay attention to measure that. But what blocks the reality is that someone promises something so beautiful. When you look at the scripts of the manifestos, they're so beautiful, but then the reality is different, and the fulfillment sometimes becomes illusion.
Maybe that's one of the reasons why candidate Museveni was absent yesterday, and I must say it's as a citizen, not even as a voter, as a citizen, I would take exception, because if you're the incumbent, even if you're a one-time incumbent, you are really the leader in the house, and if you're an incumbent, you should be anxious to tell the citizens with humility that I thank you for having given me an opportunity, and you try hard to justify why you were elected last time first, not even justifying why you should be elected, justify why you were elected that time, then come to show what indeed you actually did and why you should be. But actually in a democracy, the incumbent should even also be teaching citizens that in the event that you vote for somebody else other than myself, these are the things that you should be looking out for. But primarily because you want to benchmark on the basis of the deliverables from the manifestos. I repeat, possibly the reason why candidate Museveni wasn't there, because if you want to go from there, one candidate who's been longest there has been there for 40 years. So if you look at the so-called 10-point program, and begin from democracy, human rights, integrated whatever economy, I used to cram them, but there's no longer any need for me to cram them. And then you list them, and independence and sovereignty and Pan-Africanism, and every element of those visionary allegedly commitments have been broken. You can't talk democracy when Kizza Besigye is in jail. You can't talk democracy and rule of law when Robert Chagulanyi's supporters are beaten at will, actually criminally. You can't talk the economic emancipation of our peoples. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And the person in the streets of Lumino or Nagongera or even Namayingo cannot add into what you mean by the gains. And you can't talk about national sovereignty, independence, so-called integrated, self-sustaining, whatever economy. And the person in charge of our economy is a Pineti. The person in charge of our economy is somebody in Atiak. The person in charge of our livelihoods in terms of our infrastructure is a Chinese on the road, and the person in charge of our health services are the people who import drugs for private pharmacies. So that's neither here nor there. But you're right again, that away really from the manifestos, and I was thinking yesterday that here I am rather privileged. One, I can read these things, and two, maybe some parties will be very anxious to send me soft copies of their documents. And then finally, I'm privileged to be amongst a few tens of people in the audience. And then I look back and say, but where really are the people in Zombo? How much of them get a clue what is being discussed here? Where are the people in Mbulamuti? And where are the people in the other corner of Buikwe? And what about those people, even sometimes somewhere in a particular corner of Kanungu? They really just have no clue. But again, is it about political parties and leaders being able to reach out? They will say that they go around the country to campaign. I think many of these penetrations would be how much of what we're discussing today will go out. I don't know what your cover is in terms of reaching out to the country. I don't know what your viewership is and things like that. All those sort of kind of things matter. Maybe partly because of that, therefore, people come to look for shortcuts in terms of how to buy the votes away from the presidential elections. We don't mind to go particularly to the parliamentary ones, which possibly much more critical because in terms of numbers, people go down there to buy ambulances. People go down there to buy mabatis for churches and local community schools. But that's really not the responsibility of members of parliament. Members of parliament should make sure that the relevant ministries have sufficient monies, and the monies are allocated in such a manner that what goes to defense is scrutinized and is proportionate to the needs of defense, and what goes to health, agriculture and infrastructure are the right ones, and those that go to those sectors are monies that are appropriately used. And so it's neither here nor there. But that said, really, of all these candidates, who has been there? Candidate Museveni, as I said, he wasn't there. It is unfair to suggest that Mafabi would not, because he's a first-timer. We can say, except for candidate Museveni, the rest are first or second-timers, and they've never had opportunities to be able to do that. But I think what would be more important is to do the costings. Okay. That's why I told you that in the questionings and how these people were presenting themselves, I didn't see including the figures man, but the figures man did possibly better. But I don't remember, meaning Nandala, that look, we will take 2 trillion from classified spending and share it between health and education and the environment. And on health, we shall possibly ring fence 20% on maternal health sector, and or push a particular amount to addressing the usual common thing called malaria. I'm just using those as examples. And ring fence a particular amount that is going to education to ensure that we mitigate the high level of dropout from primary education, where you know that out of every 10 of people who start UPE, 7 to 8 drop out in a year. These guys get lost somewhere. I mean, drop out by the time they do their PLE. And nobody talks about those figures, and nobody talks about where those people are. So while we're actually churning out quite a huge amount of graduates who also get lost, the worst ones that we churn out are the dropouts at primary living. And those people are going to quite continuously part of our economy. And yet here we're saying the economy is growing at a certain proportional level, when the population should grow 1.6, at most 2%. In fact, it can never go to 2%. If the population grows at 1.6, meaning per annum, meaning the Ugandan population since NRA guys came in town has grown 4 times. Uganda's economy has possibly grown more than 40 times, and you can't explain why. Before I come into your studio, I'm able to meet young people from districts that used to be the best performers, people who are dropping out of secondary school because they can't afford school fees, and people, I met somebody yesterday who's an Askari who got an A in mathematics and got 12 points, but is now an Askari, earning 300,000 shillings and is very happy about that money. In my time, I had university free education and I was paid to study. I don't know how in this debate those conversations go deeper to those numbers, and any of the candidates able to tell you how they turn it around, and particularly the candidate who spent the longest, who is candidate Museveni in the last 40 years, who will tell you that, by the way, we brought you peace. And as I'll tell some of your people that you can't be in for 40 years, create mayhem for 20, and 20 years later tell us that you brought peace, and relatively compare it with the previous administration of Obote, which is 4.5 years of between 1980, 81 and 85. And that administration for which there was peace in Toru, but the war in Luweero was your creation.
So, Mr. Ochieno, as we look at this, what is the most critical problem of Uganda that should be addressed by the campaigns? I mean, by the contestants.
The contestants, it is up to them to pick whatever it is, and I don't think there's any one specific thing. But I think if you want one thing that Ugandans need to do as the electors, Ugandans just need to be bold and courageous enough and cause change.
Okay.
This country needs a reset after 40 years. Quite clearly, 40 years has failed. I am lucky enough to have been a first-time voter in 1980. I'm lucky enough to have lived in Kampala, Obote 2 administration. I'm lucky enough to have gone around the world in the last several years. I'm lucky enough to tell you that I've gone also around this continent, but also lucky enough to tell you that I got free education in this country, free access to health. I traveled in a train. I told people that I escaped exile on Uganda Airlines and I returned on Kenya Airways. And I can tell you that I saw Uganda transport bus companies from Kampala to Luzira. But I can also tell you that when I was coming here, I was choked in traffic. And there is something fundamentally wrong that has gone into this country. This country needs one thing, and this needs leadership. This country has been fundamentally betrayed by a leadership that had all the opportunities in the last 40 years and has failed. So we need a reset. And that reset should not only be change, but that reset should come with change with a commitment to a national healing and a national reconciliation. And that reset will have to inject some sense in terms of values on the citizens of this country, and that values may hopefully cause a possibility in which we look at the critical things. One, the economic hemorrhage in terms of corruption. At 10 trillion shillings corruption, lost amount of money, lost to corruption per year. That is not only criminal, that is something that should really be sending somebody to Luzira. In other countries that believe in the death penalty is on the penal code. In Uganda, I do not believe in the death penalty. I'm pleased that my party governed twice, and Milton Obote, one of his proudest things is that he told me, Joe, I never signed a death warrant. So I don't believe in the death penalty, and a future UPC government would strike that off with the statute, because if I can find some crazy person who likes X and other things, and they can just go ahead and hang somebody very easily, and by the time they wake up in the morning say, oh, we are sorry, and then things like that. So so 10 trillion on corruption. If you're able to check that, then there is no reason why you don't deal with the other more important things. The more important things are not asking me about these people's manifestos, and somebody was saying that Ugandans like to write proposals and then the Banyarwanda and others go ahead and implement them. The natural thing to focus on very urgently is education. education and education. Education is the number one net injector. Education is the number one equalizer in society. And as I said, it's criminal that every 10 young people who start primary school in this country, only 7 to 8%, 7 or 8% of them get lost. So basically, you've killed an entire future of nearly 70 to 80% of young starters in life. So that is education. But number two, education for which you find young, beautiful, clever girls who are 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, stop partly because they've gotten pregnant, but stop partly because the parents can't afford school fees. And education in which people go to universities and parents sell land, and like some of the young people who approach me every now and again, the graduates, including those I find walking down the streets of City Square, and they do not have jobs. And education in which people even fear to apply for jobs because they don't know anybody. Let me tell you, at independence, just in 1962, the independence government, thankfully led by my party, recognizes that education is at the center and make education free. Education was free from, backed by a legislation in 1964 for a universal education, universal meaning from primary to university by 1972. But what do? They grant primary education as subsidized, meaning parents pay school fees, but it's subsidized fees. The amount of fees that parents paid, in those administrations, is equivalent to more than what the current regime pays to per child, and they call it universal primary education. O-level education was also subsidized. But what your viewers ought to know, and particularly young viewers ought to know, is that education in this country, when you finish primary leaving exams and you do not go to secondary school, you go to teacher training college, nursing, or any tertiary institution, it was free. Did you know that? When you finish O-level, you go to grade 3, or any other training, education was free. But when you finish O-level and you qualify to go to A-level, education up to university was fully free. Now, that is what was provided by this country. So those are visionary leaders who believed you must inject and skill into those ones. Whether you go to Uganda National, College of Commerce's, technical institution, all of them fundamentally free. But also, once you've graduated, you're guaranteed a job. But as I said, this new friends of ours will tell you, oh, the population has grown. Yes, Mr. Museveni did economics in Dar es Salaam, at the expense of Ugandans, thanks to UPC, we provided for him free. So, as I said, the economy grows, rather the population grows 4 times in 40 years. The economy grows 45 times, or 50, as you boast about it. What is the commonsensical reason why you cannot provide free education? So the guys of the 60s, 70s, and 80s was able to provide for that population, and today you're not able to. Where does the money go? I said 10 trillion shillings. That goes merely onto corruption. Redirect that resource to specific education, inject it into health, push it to agriculture, push it to partly infrastructure, 10 trillion, push it partly to infrastructure, push it to environment, decongest my capital city, Kampala, and you'll see a change. But beyond that, how much does State House and the Defense Ministry take? Part of the conversation that was not massively held yesterday was this thing on how you use fiscal policies and taxation to redirect resources. So that is what should be done, and that's what should have been done. I don't know whether any of these candidates can be blamed for that, because I don't know whether or not they would do it. But as I said, number one thing you need is a change to a leadership that is able to pick up many of these other things, reprioritize. And the power of that lies in the voters, particularly young people, who ought to go ahead and vote. Now, my problem is then that you go ahead and vote. UPC is not there. We've been denied the opportunity to be able to do that by the incompetence of the authorities who've clogged the judicial system, or possibly have weaponized it, But also on the other, regardless of that, who are the other alternative candidates who are able to provide for that? I am not really directing you towards that, but I'm just opening up your mind to simply say that no. The challenges are huge, but the alternative cannot be doing nothing.
Thank you so much. And of course, you highlight something that is important. Of course, we've had the president on several occasions saying his vision is to see free education for all. And of course, telling students, schools known to charge, especially government schools under UPE and USE arrangements, known to charge school fees. Because
that's a nonsense. I think you're giving the guy airtime for nothing, because that's not true, because it's not happening. You can't be the president and your wife is the Minister of Education and you want me to give you credit by what you say. This should be the action that you've had. And let me tell you this, because I take this very personally. Had Mr. Museveni lived under his regime as a youngster, he would not have gone to entire school. Think about it. Mr. Museveni would not have gone to entire school had he lived under this regime, because his parents couldn't afford. Had Museveni lived under this regime, he would not have gone to Dar es Salaam University because his parents wouldn't have afforded. Had Museveni lived under this regime, he would not have worked in Milton Obote's president's office, because he would know nobody, because nobody knew him. But he got all this on merit, including in president's office. Mr. Museveni made a simple application as a young graduate of an average degree of economics and political science, and was recruited by one Mr. Okwenje Musamea, who had no clue who he was. Okay. That's what we're talking about. And by that, take it very strongly. But also, number two, as I was trying to tell you in terms of cost and priorities of money, you do that, and then you look at the health services, and people are coming and say, oh, health insurance. To the extent that Ugandans don't know that health insurance is privatizing life through the back door. I don't understand it. It is possible. By their talk as, I'm a socialist. I'm a progressive leftist. But I'm a completely convictionist, realistic politician. Okay. It is absolutely possible to grant health, universal free health services to all the citizens of this country, free at the point of delivery. Yesterday, before that television program, I met an upper middle class Ugandan citizen with a PhD, who is broken, Ugandan citizen who is broken because their young son is suffering from a critical, I don't know whether suffering from cancer without referring to the person, And the guy had to leave a job because they couldn't afford treatment here in Uganda. Now, the deputy head of Cancer Institute is a very hobby of mine, and they do a fantastic job. But the issue is not his skills; the issue is money. I have friends who are doctors around the world. During COVID, I wrote in my then Sunday column in the Monitor. One of the top doctors advising South African government during COVID is a young friend of mine, and there was basically his mentor. One of the guys advising Scottish government is a young colleague of mine, an hobby of mine, slightly much a senior to me. One of the closest friends whom I part supported in a particular area was supporting an entire health sub-region in UK. It is criminal. These can be done and should be done in this country. My Tororo was the second most industrialized town in Uganda after our industrial capital, Jinja. Tororo, by and large, now is a slum. Tororo, in 40 years, and I don't know what gains NRA can boast about for Bukede, because in Tororo, as a district, after 40 years, there is not a single new tarmac, no new tarmac on the whole of Tororo district. Today, not 1/4 kilometer of tarmac in Tororo as a district. Instead, from Tororo town to Robongi Barracks, going to my home in Agongara, and you're invited, by the way, tarmac has retreated by 3 kilometers. In my Agongara town, small township as it was, we had 1 mile of tarmac in my small town. Yeah? The 1 mile of tarmac has been eaten.
Back to madam.
Do you know? That's sort of what we're talking about. So, I had a friend who was advertising for a job. And as I usually do, I put this in a specific social media space. I found people who've done social work and social administration, SWASA, okay? Multitudes of people went into my inbox. Obviously, one of them got the job. And you look through people's CVs and say, these are people. In my year to Makerere, yeah, SWASA was the most prestigious arts course, most competitive. So, you know, the intake for SWASA was higher than that of law or Bachelor of Commerce, as the then prestigious arts courses. So, what is this?
As we wind up, I see our time is in a minute. What do you think should be done to redeem this country?
It is urgent. People should bang the table.
Okay.
Bang the table. Young people should wake up. All citizens should wake up. This being a church program, I think people need to go and pray.
Okay.
Religious leaders need to open up their minds. We should invoke our banner Jesus. People should forget, for once, think about their tummies, but focus on tomorrow. And tomorrow are children and the future of this country. So this country needs change, and urgently. So we need a change of government. We need a reset in this government and in this country. But at the same time, part of whatever change should really involve a national truth and reconciliation that involves a transition. That transition should be one in which all of us are committed to ensuring that nobody ends up in exile. And the people who should be going to Luzira should be doing less, so that there's a possibility that we're able to say that please don't go to Luzira, let's all of us start together. But for that to happen, I think it will require leadership. Now, the current 8 people who are standing as candidates, minus Mr. Museveni remaining 7, they really need to have a message to Ugandans that show that they will be committed to a national healing, including inviting Mr. Museveni for tea, something that I promised, that a future UPC presidency in which I am in charge, I would invite him for tea from Rakitura to come to Nagongera Ondi to State House and share tea with him. So that will give possibilities. I'm a grandfather, he's a grandfather, and the majority of the children in this country are equivalent of his grandchildren's age. We should be looking into the future. We should kill corruption, but you can't really kill it. You should lead by example. Milton Obote told me as a parting shot that for twice as he was president, that no member of his close family was allowed to have a bank account abroad. So if you lead by example in that way, your cabinet are likely to behave. But if somebody goes and steals money like Pinetti, somebody also be able to take responsibility. But at the same time, when you claim that you went to the bush to break people's necks because of electoral politics, it's completely unacceptable that we should challenge. I mean, we should let people point and beat others with sticks, as that humiliating thing. But definitely what happens, whoever is responsible for commanding and authorizing that police dogs, should be used to challenge young Ugandans who are only going to seek public opinion. Those people should be disciplined. Comrade Otafere, you're responsible for this. Is unacceptable. I last saw that with apartheid in South Africa. That reminds me of the times of the Boers in Kenya, and the times when the civil rights activists were fighting for the rights of the average African in America. This is possible. This country has been governed well before Mr. Museveni. 2 administrations were fantastic administrations, economically, socially, and politically. We had issues in 1966. 1966 we had issues. I want to come back and we discuss what it is, because these are misinformation. And we had 1980 general elections. It was the last free and fair, open, competitive elections, 1980, and it delivered a government. And since then, we've never had one. Let's hope that 2026 can provide a peaceful change of government.
Let's hope. Thank you so much, Mr. Ochieno, and to your viewer. Thank you so much. We've come to the end of Issues at Hand. Today being a 1st of December, it is World AIDS Day, and of course, the message is let us go through this day, reflecting on a few things, but most importantly, let us say no to stigma as we support our brothers and sisters who are living with HIV and AIDS. Do not stigmatize them, love them. They are human beings. The only difference between you and them is that they are living with HIV, but they are human beings and they can do absolutely everything that you can do. So do not stigmatize anybody. Thank you so much for watching, and from the entire team, we wish you a blessed morning.
Issues at hand.